This is live. Okay, live. Hi, this is your sewing Sherpa, soon to be your sewing shaman, or maybe your sewing guru. I've been told I'm not a Sherpa. I don't know. I'm kind of a Sherpa. Your sewing Sherpa, Shauna. And this is Sew Lunchables, where we spend 15 minutes learning about different presser feet. So today we're going to learn about the overlock foot for the home sewing machine. And before I go into that though, I want to show you what an actual overlock machine does. And so you can kind of see like what the home sewing overlock machine is attempting to do. So this right here is a fancy schmancy Enlighten overlock, wave overlock, and it has this like air threading system. This is the first time I've threaded a machine with air threading. It's brilliant. I think this machine costs, you know, like a lot of money, but it was gifted to me by Robin Moore. Thank you, Robin. And I can't believe she gave this to me like 6 months ago, and today was the first day I threaded it up. And I'm gonna have to give her a call. But so the overlock machine, the purpose of it, well, it's got a couple of different purposes. The overlock machine has got a knife in it, and it cuts the edge of the fabric. Of course, you don't always have to have that knife engaged. You can do different techniques with an overlock machine. This particular overlock machine has got, I mean, here is the threading guide for this. It has got a 4-thread overlock, 3-thread narrow, 3-thread overlock narrow hem, rolled edge, flat lock's cool, a wide flat lock, 2-thread flat lock, blanket stitch, ladder stitch, wave stitch. I think it even does like cover stitch, although I'm not seeing it on here. Somebody told me it does a cover stitch, but it does a lot of different things, and sometimes you'll have the knife engaged and sometimes not. But the great thing about it is that it clean finishes the edge, and then you'll see it has these 4 threads. You can use 2 or 3 depending on what you're after. And it clean finishes the edge, right? It's cutting the edge off, and then you'll see it wraps it with thread. So you've got your inner needle, your outer needle, your upper looper, and your lower looper. So you've got 4 different threads going right now. When you use the 4 threads on a 4-thread overlock, usually you're sewing a seam for knits. If you're clean finishing the edge of your fabric, you'll probably take one of the threads off, the outer upper needle, all the needles are on the up, but anyways, the outer needle, and have a little bit narrower. It's just kind of clean finish the edge. So let's see, what is clean finishing the edge? Let's see if I have any example on me. I was going to bring in a skirt. I found one. Oh, look, this particular dress, they use the 4-thread overlock to sew the entire seam. That is cheating. That is actually not a good way to make a seam. You want to use a lock stitch. There are 5-thread overlocks that have a lock stitch, well, actually it's the chain stitch next to the overlock that clean finishes it. But a lot of times manufacturers will take out that step of the lock stitch and just use the overlock machine, because it gives such a clean finish, and it kind of does create a seam, but it's not a seam that you really want to have. Anyways, that is your overlock machine, and these are really freaking fast, especially if you've got an industrial one. So it's cutting and wrapping, and you can see we're trucking along. All right, let's go over here to our home sewing machine. So our home sewing machine has got 3 official overlock stitches. So we have stitch 6, 7, and 8. So if I go up to stitch 6, it says use foot G. So foot G looks like this. It's got, the main thing about it is that it's got this bar right here that keeps your thread from causing your fabric to collapse. And it's hard to explain what that means, but on here you'll see that this lays nice and flat, and it's wrapping the edge. So if it were collapsing, it'd be like squished up, and that would mean the tension's too tight on this. But oftentimes on home sewing machines, it'll just collapse the edge because it's sewing around the edge. So anyhow, it's also got a guide on this side to kind of help you guide the edge of your fabric. So I'll pop that on, and I'm gonna pop on my reading glasses, get a fresh piece of fabric. So here you can see the thread, the edges of the fabric a little bit frayed. Sometimes before doing an overlock stitch, if you have a lot of frays or the frays are getting really deep, you might want to take a rotary cutter or shears to it and kind of clean that off. That would act as like the knife on that other machine. So I'm going to stick this under here, and I'm going to use this guide right here on the foot to bump my fabric up against. And I'll usually like hand crank it through a few cycles just in case things are not lining up, because you know, like sometimes you can buy secondhand or aftermarket feet and things may not line up with the stitch on your machine. This one is the official foot for this, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to believe that it's going to work. So I put my needle down. It's already preset me to a 2.0 length and a 3.5 width. I'm not going to argue with that. So you see, it's wrapping the edge. There we go. And it's just a real simple kind of, it's wrapping the edge. And the reason why the part that goes off the fabric isn't causing it to scrunch up is because it has that little wire on the foot that holds the thread. The thread gets wrapped around it instead of just the edge of the fabric. So now it lays nice and flat. And that should keep the edge of your fabric from unraveling. Those little dings out. So that's stitch number 6. Let's try stitch number 7. And I don't know why you would use one over the other. They look almost identical to me right now. But again, I will line up the right edge with the guide. I'm going to do just a few inches of this just to see. All right, let's see what this does compared to the other one. So this one, as you can see, has got a little bit more of a solid line here. So it's like a stitch forward and a stitch back. You can kind of feel it when you're sewing. It's a little bit slower. It's a little bit wider, which is nice. That one's really, really narrow. And then we have our final stitch, which is stitch 8. Stitch 8 says to use foot J. So I'm going to pop this off and use foot J. Did it fall on the floor or something? Like the foot I was using, the foot that was on here. Anyone? Oh, there it is. I found it. No worries. Crouching tiger, hidden foot. Got this. Got this. Stick that in there, and let's see what stitch J does. So I don't have a guide on this one. I don't, you know, there's no like edge of the foot guide, and so I don't know really where to set it up. So I'm gonna have to start and just kind of see like what happens. All right, there we go. So I know that I need to have when it's so, I'm gonna take this down as slow so you can see it. I know that when it gets over into the right position, it's supposed to be pretty much off the edge of the fabric. So that's how I'm like watching it. And it set it up at stitch length 2.5 and width of 5. So let's see what this one does. All right, that should be enough. So you can kind of see it scrunching the edge a little bit. It's kind of scalloping it a little bit. It's kind of pulling it in instead of it laying flat, and that's because it doesn't have that wire to wrap around. So it's got that kind of troughing going on the back. But this is a good stitch to use if you don't have the overlock foot. This is the one that was made for overlocking with just your normal presser foot. So those are the 3 overlock stitches that you would use on your home sewing machine. Now with a real overlock machine, oftentimes called a serger, but serger was a brand name. It's kind of like calling all facial tissues Kleenex. You know, it's a brand name. Serger was a brand name. These are actually overlock machines. The purpose of the overlock machine is to clean finish the edges of woven fabrics Again, this manufacturer chose to use it to make the actual seam, which it looks horrible. I'm moving on. And also you use it to sew the actual seams for knits because it stretches really well and it holds itself together like after being stretched. So it is the preferable machine to use for when you're sewing stretchy fabrics or when you're sewing knit fabrics. This particular stitch here is not made for using on stretch fabric. This is solely to clean finish the edges of a woven material. That's all it's for. If you're going to be sewing stretch fabric on this machine, there are what we call safety stitches or secure stitches, and there's stitches that go forward and backwards, and we'll go over that later. Like this is a safety stitch as well as a decorative stitch. And those ones, what they do is they sew forward and then backward, then forward and backwards. So it kind of back tacks each stitch, which is such a pain to unpick. But I am actually going to be teaching a stretch and sew class, and it is on, it starts on August 27th. Right now it's running 2 weeks, but I think I might add a third week onto it. Before you take the stretch and sew class though, if you're thinking about getting an overlock machine, the week before I have a professional overlock teacher coming in to teach a class called Serger Basics, and I recommend that you have a serger for the Serger Basics class. She recently sent me a list of ones that she recommends, and she's also going to come in tomorrow and do a little video blog for her profile on our website that will talk about the different sergers. And if you want to schedule some time with her just to do a little one-on-one like virtual shopping or informational, she will do that. But you don't have to have a serger for the stretch and sew class. We will be covering how to use a serger and how to use a home sewing machine for your stretch and sew, which is, you know, important to know how to use either one of them. So the serger class is on the Saturday the 20th, and then the following week is when the stretch and sew class starts. So, anybody, any questions? Any questions?
Well, I had one. I'm probably going to not phrase it well, but you said that one of these, when you're just finishing a seam, one of the oranges you said you don't need. You just, and I was wondering which one wouldn't you thread up?
Well, you wouldn't thread up this one
I think
because
you pointed to that one.
yeah, the reason why is that this is actually a fairly wide area here, the width from the inside needle to where the outside where the loops are. So if you compare it to the width of say this one, it's like almost twice as wide.
It is.
And this one here, it's like a third wider, and this one, it's also a third wider. And the thing is like that's good for stabilizing the edge of, you know, like say you're sewing a seam, to have as much of that fabric sandwiched in there as possible. But when you're just clean finishing, you don't need that one. You're just cleaning up the edge, right? So if you take out that inner needle, it comes out narrower, and you save a lot more on your looper threads because they're not looping in quite as far. And you also don't have as much of an opportunity to trough it, you know, where it squishes it together. It'll lay flat better. And but you know, I've used a 4-thread to. It just is a little bit overkill to use all 4 threads on a clean finishing.
Thank you.
Great question.
That was very informative.
Okay. Well, this is your Sewing Sherpa Shauna signing off for the weekend. If you have any questions, feel free to call, email, text, or pop in on Mondays. Have a great week.